Guys, you're in for a good one this week. Let's do it.
There exists a threat, from anti-hunting groups to politicians trying to give our land away, and we won't stand for it. Those vast western landscapes provide the space for our wildlife to thrive and a place for hunters and anglers to fuel the fire that sparks their soul. In this show, we share our love of hunting, fishing, and conservation. Here, we provide the foundation to meet these threats through passion and the grit of the American outdoorsman. Welcome to the Western Huntsman Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's episode of the Western Huntsman Podcast. This is Jim Huntsman, your host, coming at you from the Broken Town studio right here in Clark Fork, Idaho. Hope you guys are doing good. I know we are neck deep in, many of you are into the whitetail season. We just finished mule deer season up here. In fact, today was the last day in a lot of the units up north here in Idaho, so I've seen a lot of just masher bucks going down, but I failed to deliver. So now I'm turning my attention to muzzleloader elk and these wily old whitetails cruising around North Idaho, and we'll see how we do. But in the meantime, I've got a new friend that has written a book called Turning Feral. And in all or full discretion, I have not totally finished the book yet. I'm about halfway through, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a great book, and the author's name is Zach Hanson. And by luck, we were able to record tonight and get him on the show and get this book in front of you guys, because I think you're going to really like it if you check it out. So, Zach, welcome to the show, man.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here. I've been a fan for a while, and hearing my own theme song is what it really boils down to.
Man, the craziest thing just happened. I don't know what happened, but you cut out there. I just hit record again. Now it's fine. So we're going to have like this weird gap there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, that happens. I'm going to blame Verizon instead of AT&T this time around.
So I record on a software called Audacity, and it just like suddenly stopped recording. I don't know what happened. I must have hit a button. Anyway. No, to answer your question, when I first recorded that intro, I am not normally all that anal retentive, but I was so anal about how it sounded, and I recorded like 20 different versions of it, and I settled on this one, and it was probably the most imperfect one. I just like the way it flowed, so I listened to it like 100 times when I first recorded it, and this was back in 2019. And I've never changed it, so I don't know. I appreciate it.
Well, it's awesome. It would make me want to like bash through the walls like a Kool-Aid man every morning. So.
It does pump me up, man. Every time I start recording, it's like, okay, I hit the intro music. I found that music on this. You can jump on these different websites or whatever that sell this music, so you have the copyrights to it. Because I didn't know when I first started recording a podcast, I thought you could just use whatever music you wanted. And I had some song that I've always liked or whatever. And apparently I learned quick that was illegal. You got to have rights to use it. So I had to go buy the rights to that. And I really liked the music. Me and my wife picked it out.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. Oh, I'm pumped up too. So I'm ready to rock and roll.
Sweet, man. I like hearing that. Let's kick it off by kind of introducing. You've got a super interesting background, man. And it kind of, I don't want to like give away the essence of the book by any means, but give us a snapshot of who you are and walk us through like where you were a few years ago versus where you are now.
Yeah, well, why don't we start with where I'm at now, which is Atlanta, Idaho, which is a small town of 35 people. No grocery store, no gas station. It's about 70 miles up the middle fork of the Boise River from Boise. And we're at the base of the Sawtooth Mountains on the southern side, the good side, as compared to Stanley and Ketchum and that area. Very much a off the grid town, right? There's 35 of us. Our power is self-run. We do everything by ourselves, and it's a great community. But to contrast that, where I was a few years ago, was in a bunch of big cities. I had always bounced around between New Orleans, New York, San Francisco, doing kind of the typical Bermuda Triangle in the United States of the tech hubs of the world. And then ultimately just packed my bags up and made my way to Idaho. So it's a little bit of a foreshadowing of a little bit of the book. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm off grid now, and I started off where I was very much in the opposite world.
Well, I want to talk a little bit deeper about that, but how'd you grow up, Zach?
So I grew up in Georgia, the state. It's interesting because where I grew up, there was a lot of hunting, right? Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee. Oh, yeah. I had a lot of friends that were into hunting, but for whatever reason, mostly because my family didn't hunt, I didn't come from a hunting family, I just never took to it. I had friends who would go with their families and I'd occasionally get invited, but for whatever reason, as a kid, it just didn't strike me. I loved being in the woods. I loved reading books like Call of the Wild. I loved reading about mountain men, but for some reason, it just didn't hook me as a kid, and mostly because I didn't have much of an opportunity.
Sure.
But grew up in Georgia, South Carolina, went to high school there, was a wrestler all through high school and into college. And yeah, just grew up in the Southeast.
So like you didn't hunt, but you didn't have like a negative view towards hunting or really a positive view. It was just kind of a thing that was there that you didn't do. Am I tracking?
You're tracking it completely right, but it's also one of these things where, growing up in the early 90s and, going to school in the 2000s, early 2000s, hunting was there, but I only ever saw it as a trophy type of exploit. And for some reason that didn't appeal to me, but we had so much abundance in the, early 90s, early 2000s, pre 9/11. Like, I didn't grow up around people who were really hunting for food. So it was not something that I connected to, like sustenance or a good, healthy source of meat at that time. So I think that's what kind of kept me at bay a little bit, is I just didn't really see the point.
And then you grow up and you go, what do you go to college for this? Like, I don't even know exactly what it is you do, something in tech. And I know that you were living a pretty bougie lifestyle there. It seemed like from the book.
It was. Yeah, it was, but it didn't start out that way. So I actually, let me put it frankly, my dad kind of gave me the option of like hard hat or college application. I wouldn't say that I was like a star student in high school. I was mostly focused on wrestling and girls. So, college was something that I just kind of fell into and ended up going to a state school, like one of the two that actually accepted me. And I wasn't a tech major. I was actually a political science major. And from there, I started to really pick up my academics. I'm like, wow, I really kind of want to do something with my life. Let me button down a little bit. So I did in college. I actually finished college in 3.5 years instead of 4, mostly because I was paying for some of it, which helped light the fire under my ass. Yeah. Working a couple jobs through college is not always the funnest thing in the world. But I ended up getting a job with the Department of State. So I actually went overseas. So I was living abroad in Russia, Kyrgyzstan, the Republic of Georgia, ironically, and then ultimately working in Vienna, Austria. So I was doing kind of this public work, Department of State, working for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and kind of realized that the public service is great, but you're never going to make a lot of money. So I was like, well, let's go back stateside. Let's reevaluate. Let's take stock of this liberal arts degree that I've, achieved. Yay.
Sure.
But I want to do something in business. So I actually ended up going to business school in, of all places, Saudi Arabia. And that is because I am probably one of the most frugal people in the world. And I was refusing to go into debt for school. I was able to graduate undergrad debt-free from working and everything. And there are 2 countries apparently in the world that will subsidize education for foreigners. one being Finland and one being Saudi Arabia. And I had already done my time in the cold north of Russia.
Yeah.
So I said, let's give the desert a try, and ended up going there for a little bit, and started my MBA, which, is a little bit of a long-winded story, but I didn't finish it. I did 2 semesters, and ultimately the Arab Spring kicked off. So the Department of State there, after a few death threats and getting held at gunpoint a few times, were like, you know what? Being the only American on a Saudi university is probably not the best place for you right now. You should go back to the U.S. Somebody
held you at gunpoint on the campus?
Not on the campus, off the campus. And it was, Saudis, they have something called Mutawa. It's the religious police. They were kind of wondering why a, white male in Saudi Arabia was just kind of walking around, and they always carry guns. So they were walking up and, did their whole passport checks. And I was going in and out of the consulate there. So I think they had, their own suspicions. So they stopped me and did that. And then it was suggested that I should leave.
Dude, there was something. So I've been to Saudi Arabia when I was in the military, and there was something. It was, I don't know how to explain it or describe it to people that have never experienced somewhere like that outside of the U.S., where I don't want to call it authoritarian, but it kind of is. And like, there's just this general feeling of hostility in some of those countries. And like
yes.
you don't want to screw up, or you're going to, you don't want to break a law that unknowingly, you crossing the street in the wrong spot or stepping on a crack or something. Does that make sense? It's just like, you feel like some stupid shit you do you can end up in a lot of trouble. And maybe I'm off base with Saudi Arabia. I wasn't there for very long.
No, you're not. It's one of those
hostile.
things. Yeah, you're 100% correct. There's this tension that just kind of rides in the air.
Tension. That's a good way to put it.
Especially for a foreigner, like you said, where you hear stories of people being locked up for really silly shit, and you don't really know what the silly shit is that you could do. And I am one who's probably pretty prone to silly shit, so it was always
me too.
Attention for sure.
Yeah. So, okay. So then you ship yourself back, or they ship you back to the U.S. because of the Arab Spring going on. What year was that?
2012.
2012. Okay, that sounds about right. And you come back to the States. Then what?
Come back to the States. I wanted to finish my degree, my master's degree. I didn't want to pay for an MBA, so I ended up going to Johns Hopkins. I got a master's degree in analytics and statistics and got somewhat more technical. Same time, I started a company with a couple buddies. We miserably failed at building that company, like burn it to the ground, like did everything you could do wrong in a tech company starting out. And then I ended up going in industry. So I ended up working for IBM. So for the next really 8 years, I got married at the time. My now ex-wife, she was an FBI special agent. So we were just traveling around the U.S., mostly for her different locations and job requirements in the U.S. I was working for a bunch of different tech companies, IBM, got into machine learning and artificial intelligence there, went to a startup, started another company, and then went to Capital One to work on their machine learning. And then ultimately now I'm at a video company called Brightcove, which is based out of Boston. But my whole career has just been remote. Through my last marriage, it was always have bag, will travel. So, we were bouncing around for the FBI. And then I was just on a plane all the time. Like I said, I was going to New York, San Francisco, Chicago, Austin, wherever my tech teams were, which were pretty much in one of those 4 locations, for years.
So what I'm trying to highlight here for everybody listening is like, it's crazy to think, especially the way you describe it in the very beginning of the book, kind of the life you lived and, what you wore and how you had to travel early on that Monday morning and go to like DC or whatever. It's interesting to think of, because we all know that type of lifestyle. And I guess I may be able to relate it a little bit better, because I was similar in a sense that I was looking for that corporate life that you just feel like you're supposed to pursue because of the nature of our society and
Yep.
what they prop up as success or successful and blah blah blah. And I just, it just wasn't me. I didn't make it in that, because it just didn't fit who I was as a person. And it took me out of the outdoors. It took me away from the things that I want to pursue in my life that's very important to me. And so the question just, it kind of begs the question, when you're doing all that, at what point did you start getting this itch to pursue that wild and primal life that you live now, and hunting became more of like, you started thinking about it? How did that even come about? Like, I know, well, I don't want to say that because it's in the book. I'm trying to be careful with that.
Yeah, no, I can answer the question. And the answer comes from the fact that when you're living that lifestyle, and I think I used the verbiage in the book, keeping up with the Joneses. Like, we were,
yes.
My ex-wife and I were doing and checking all the boxes. Like, okay, get a career, get an airline credit card so you can rack up the miles so you can get upgraded to first class all the time. Check. Drink your Jack and Coke on the flight. Check. Go to Singapore, go here, go there, take a nicer vacation somewhere. But the dissatisfaction with it was always kind of latently there. And I've always tried to suppress it with other things that living in a city could provide.
Did you know,
so for instance,
did you know why, Zach, you were dissatisfied? Just as a side note before you go on.
Not at all. And that was what was so frustrating about it, is because, it was at this point where it's like, okay, I've been chasing this for so long. I feel like the dog who like chases cars and eventually he catches up to one. He's like, oh, what the fuck do I do with this car now? I don't know. And I felt that way. And when I got to that point, it was more along the lines of, okay, now I recognize there's a void. How do I fill it? And I've always done physical things. I was a wrestler in high school. I've done jujitsu since I was 15. So I was always jujitsu.
Yeah.
My ex-wife was a world champion in jujitsu. Like, we always just were at jujitsu all the time. And it was such a great relief and release for us living this lifestyle, always on the road. But it left something else. There was just something I felt that was missing. And I tried it with ultra running, and I got a little closer, right? Because that was outside. It would at least be running through neighborhoods or a trail run if I drove my car out to somewhere to get some training in. And I started to kind of feel this pull towards the outdoors, and I just started to recognize that jiu-jitsu is great. I love it. I still do today. But the nature, just fresh air, it like gave me this hard reset every time I'd be out there. And I was like, okay, there's a pull here. And it really wasn't until my late 20s when, influencers are influencers. I am not immune to podcasters like Joe Rogan. And when he would have Cam Hanes on or talk to Jocko about shooting a bow, it was about that time where that was just starting to get popular. And I'd be listening to this. I'm like, wow, like maybe that's what I need to do. I like the outdoors. I like the idea of stalking through the grass with a bow and arrow. That sounds sexy. Let's try that. And that was kind of the impetus to even get me in, was just that thought of, how do I get a relief from this pressure that I'm feeling all the time on the road?
Yeah. And then you kind of just, not to fast forward, but I don't know if my dogs are going nuts out there. So I record in an old camping trailer, and it's not very soundproof. So sorry if my dogs are.
Well, we can't hear it, or at least I can't.
Okay,
so.
It might be picking up through the mic. Anyways, you kind of go, because the change in your life, Zach, was like super drastic. I mean, it's very drastic. You're talking about, you're living in like, what was it, New Orleans?
Yep.
This huge metro area, and then all of a sudden you're in Atlanta, Idaho, which most people, I would bet money that most Idahoans don't even know where that's at, unless they live kind of out, maybe out north of Boise or Stanley. I think Stanley's a pretty close town, isn't it?
Well, as the crow flies, yes, but driving wise, no. I mean, it's 30 miles in 20 minutes in an airplane,
Yeah.
or it's 8 hours in a car going all the way around because there's no through road through the mountains. But yeah, you're right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, most people in Idaho don't know that Atlanta, Idaho exists.
Yeah. And it's, like you said, it's small, it's off grid, but you're in the mountains, man. And for me, I love it. I love this whole concept of living one way and feeling trapped in that. I've been there. My wife and I, we moved down to Utah, to Salt Lake City, which was like this huge metro area compared to what we were used to. And we both grew up in Utah, but it wasn't like what Salt Lake City is, where we grew up. And Salt Lake City just seemed like this foreign place to us. And I remember a few years later, I'm sitting on the freeway, I-15, that runs through Salt Lake, and it's like bumper to bumper traffic. And I look up at the mountains, the Wasatch Front, which is, if anybody's ever been to Salt Lake knows what I'm talking about, this massive mountain range right there. And you can see it from anywhere in the valley. And I'm looking up at the top of that mountain, and I'm thinking, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, I need to be up there. Why am I sitting on this freeway with a million other people getting frustrated about just trying to drive home from work? Like, this is not who I am. It doesn't fit me, and I need to get the fuck out of here. And that's what we did, and we ended up back in Idaho here. But so I guess that was a very long way for me to forget the actual question I was going to ask you.
Well, I mean, we were talking about getting up to Atlanta and the drastic change.
Yeah. How did you tell everybody kind of how you found Atlanta?
Well, first off, it's probably pertinent to say that I just did not, up and leave New Orleans on a whim, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a catalytic event in my life, which was an unexpected divorce from my now ex-wife. And, I was left having just started to dabble in hunting. I had literally just taken my first whitetail buck in Tennessee with my bow. And all of a sudden I was left with ashes all around me. And I was like, well, fuck. Okay, I can go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally, within a week of finding out about this kind of unexpected divorce, was in my car with my really rickety ass old Matthews hand-me-down bow and the little bit of camo I had and a couple duffel bags, and was driving north, just on a whim. I drove up through Texas, up through New Mexico, up through Utah, stopped in, a couple national parks, and just, frankly, cried and thought about things and like, what the fuck just happened, in this blitz, and just kept driving until I landed in Boise, which was not fully random. My now ex-wife and I had done a trip to Idaho the year before, and I fell in love with it. And ironically, we went up towards Stanley in May when there was still snow on the ground, of course. And I remember being there, and this was several months before the divorce happened. And I said, hey, we're going to move to Idaho one day. And she kind of laughed. She's like, yeah, well, maybe in 18 years when I can retire from the FBI, we'll do that. And I'm like, no, it's going to happen. And I didn't realize what I put into the universe, which was that shit was going to happen, and happen sooner than I thought it would.
Wow.
But ended up in Idaho from that point on. And then when I got to Boise, I found some temporary housing, regrouped for a month or two, and then just set out on a fucking quest to find where I was going to rehabilitate myself. I knew about hunting at this point. I'd been bow hunting. I knew I wanted to learn to trap at this point too. So I wanted to find a place where I could do everything out of my back door. So I went over to like Lemhi County and went up to Leadore. I went over to the Arco area and Fairfield, went up your direction. And then on a whim, just there was one property in Atlanta that came up for sale, and it backs up to 3,000 acres of national forest land. And I went, and it was a snowstorm, and I drove 4 hours in the wrong direction. Had to find, yeah. And so ultimately I drove for like 12 hours that day just to get to Atlanta, and found it and fell in love, and was fortunately in a position to where I could get that property. And the rest was kind of history.
And so the property's off grid?
Not fully. So it is off grid in so much that it's not tied into like Idaho Power or anything like that. We have our own as a community, again, of 35 year round residents. You know, we run our own electric off of a dam that we have on the river. You know, we have propane. Ed Staub brings propane up to us every once in a while. You know, we mostly run wood burning heat. Yeah, obviously we have generators for the house, but yeah, pretty much off grid outside of the electricity that's self-run as a co-op.
So I'm just like friends and coworkers and family. You up and moved to this cabin out in the middle of nowhere. I know you still work remotely from it, but like friends and family at the time, and even your coworkers, you're like, hey, you know, I got a wild hair and decided to move to Idaho in the mountains where I'm in a town of 35 people. What was their reaction?
I think a lot of people were worried about me. I mean, just to be frank, yeah, I've been prone to I don't view them as drastic steps in my life, but you know, my parents, other people that I've put through the ringer, I'm sure have. You know, like as far as like, oh, I'm going to go up and go to school in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Parents are like, well, shit, that's weird. You know, or I got a job in Russia. You got a job where? Or, you know, I've just led this life. So I think people come to expect it. But, you know, with the hurt, everything from the divorce, I think people probably thought, well, that's pretty on par for Zach. However, we're worried about the guy, too, because now he's doesn't know what the fuck he's doing as far as living off grid. And not only did he just go the full, you know, football field length to the other end of the playing field, but he doesn't even know how to score a touchdown, you know.
Yeah. So this high-tech exec moves to a town of 35 people in a self-sufficient community where, you know, the idea, generally speaking, because I know Idaho pretty well, is there's a self-reliance. There's not a big fondness of outsiders moving in.
Yep.
How, I mean, you kind of touch on it in the book, but I kind of want to know how that went down. What was the reaction to your new neighbors and all that kind of stuff?
You know, being on the other side of that now, having been up there for a few years, like I love it because when we have new people come up, again, there's very low turnover, right? There's only so many properties up there. But when people come in, there's literally one bar in the town, a restaurant called the Beaver Lodge. It's great. They have rooms. If you ever want to come to Atlanta, check them out. However, it's very much, and if you've been to any small town in Idaho or probably anywhere else in the West, you know, if you come in, even if you're visiting, like it's a locals club and the locals are going to be at that bar and you walk in and you can feel the looks just cut through your soul.
Oh yeah.
And
that's how it is in my town.
Yeah.
It's like the old Western movies when the newcomer comes through the swinging doors and like the jukebox stops and everybody turns and stops what they're doing and looks at them. That's kind of how it is here.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what I got for a while. And, you know, to be fair, it was, there's a vetting process. Like, okay, who's this new guy? Is he from California? Yes or no? No. Okay, that's a little better. Is he a coon ass from Louisiana? Yes. I guess that makes it a little better. So it was kind of the slow vetting process along the way. But in most circumstances, I would imagine if someone from Idaho or, you know, someone who had some experience of being self-sufficient landed here, they would probably do better than me because they would be showcasing their skills like, oh, I can go fix this truck, or yeah, I know how to put chains on my truck tires, or I know how to start a fire in my wood burning stove, of which I knew nothing. So not only was I this new outsider, but I was also just this new outsider dumbass who had never lived in such a place as Atlanta. And similar to yours, it's a violent place, not just from like a person standpoint, but when you're 8,000 feet plus in the Idaho mountains with no real, you know, utilities, no real public services, like it is tough living, especially in the winter. That was kind of right where I was coming out of. And, you know, I just didn't know what I was doing. So I probably made a fool of myself, but eventually we broke through that.
Yeah, I mean, how anybody would, man, in that kind of scenario. I mean, granted, there was a couple of funny things you'd mentioned in the book, but it's one of those things where, I mean, anytime you go somewhere new, you don't know what you're doing to an extent of which you don't know how you're fucking up. you know, and so
exactly.
You don't realize you're making a dumbass out of yourself, and so it makes it okay. I mean, in a lot of ways. So, and I think that, you know, there is a lot of, especially, well, I imagine it's like that in like Wyoming and Montana. I have friends in Wyoming and Montana that kind of say the same kind of thing, but there's a lot of resistance to newcomers coming in from out of state, because I think a lot of us worry about, you know, are they coming here to try to shake things up? Are they coming here to try to bring the things that didn't work in their state and try to think that they're going to work here? And so I think that that's where the resistance comes from. And obviously there's frustration on the, you know, overcrowdedness of a lot of things and areas that we all enjoy as being rural Idahoans, you know, and so there's always that concern. But what I've been finding, and I know there's people that would disagree, but the people that come here from out of state are generally like-minded, and they're coming here to escape something that is not like-minded. And so they tend to fit right in. And so it's a good, you know, it's a good mix. It's a good mix of people. And I know it does get frustrating because it jacks housing prices up. And I'm careful with what I say, Zach, because sometimes I'll say something and people misinterpret it. And then I'll get a flood of nasty emails. And so, not that I care, whatever, send them. But that's my I guess reaction to it is because these small towns, it is so resistant to outsiders, and especially if they feel like they're not already on their level of, you know, living this self-reliant life that is basically off grid and out in the middle of nowhere, and you have to, you know, like you said, I'm not at 8,000 feet, but winters are tough living, man. I mean, they are tough living up here. We get a ton of snow. You get a ton of snow. The roads are tough. Everything is violent and tough, and it's just all harder because everything's frozen. You know,
you know, but to that point though, in touching on like the outsiders coming in, I think where I was able to have success and where I can call all the people that live up there year round, who are just hard ass people, you know, who range in age from, you know, mid-30s up until their 80s still, you know, is that I wasn't changing anything. Like, I was coming to go step back in time. And when you ask anybody who's been up to Atlanta, Idaho, it is literally like stepping back into the 1800s, which I love. Like, It is so different and so amazing and so hard that it just engrosses you. And that's exactly what I was seeking. Like, I talk about it in the book, but, you know, I'd always been living this life where I was having to come up with tough things to feel like they had consequences, but most of the things didn't really have consequences. Like, not anything dire, right? Jiu-jitsu, I might get choked out. Ultra running, I might get tired. You know, when I was overseas, there was a little bit of danger, but it was nothing that was, you know, imminent. It's not like I was in a war zone or anything. But after the divorce, after everything else, wanting to learn this lifestyle, I just wanted to have that learning curve be so steep that it would be a literal do or die situation. And that's what it turned into. And, you know, thankfully the people in the town, I think, saw that, appreciated it. And then everyone there, once you kind of break through the mold, right? And I'm sure you know this, rural Idahoans, it's just like being in the South. To me, like, everyone's so damn nice. Like, whether they see from your viewpoint or not, like, they die for you.
There is only one call company here at the Western Huntsman, and that is Phelps Game Calls. Born out of hunting and the necessity to make the best calls on the market, Jason Phelps started this company in his garage back in 2009. And now he's got some of the finest lineup of elk calls, turkey calls, predator calls, waterfowl calls available on the market. If you guys go to the website, check it out and get what you need. And if you're in the market, when you go to checkout, use promo code Huntsman10 for 10% off. Whether you're just getting started or have expert level calling skills, check it out at Phelps Game Calls. Get them close. Hoffman Boots is a fourth generation owned boot company, a family of shoemakers based in North Idaho. I've been sporting a pair of Hoffmans for close to a decade, and I really like the Hoffman Explorer in the 8-inch. It's the best boot out there, so check it out at hoffmanboots.com, and you'll see the whole lineup of hunting boots and lineman boots and pack boots and everything else right there on the website. And if you choose to purchase a pair of boots, make sure you use the promo code all caps lock Huntsman10 for 10% off. Scree Gear, extreme high-performance hunting attire and gear that is scientifically tested. Complete layering systems and some of the finest merino wool products to keep you warm and comfortable. And it's all backed by a great company. What I really like about Scree is if you go to the website, they have these bundle options like the elk bundle or the whitetail bundle or the turkey bundle. All that stuff that'll get you completely outfitted for your favorite hunt. The starter bundle is a really good deal. Make sure you check that out. They've got the VIP sizing guarantee. And so you can exchange something if it doesn't fit right at absolutely no charge to you. Guys, it's a great warranty, great company. And at checkout, as always, use promo code The Western Huntsman for 15% off and free shipping. The Elk Collective. Folks, the best investment you can make when it comes to hunting is what's between your ears. Having elk knowledge is what separates those who succeed every once in a while versus those who notch a tag every single year. So go to the Elk Collective and sign up. There's over 150 videos in this online course to teach you everything you need to know by some of the best experts to ever enter the elk woods. It's a great program at a great price, guys. And if you use the promo code, The Western Huntsman, you're going to get $20 off of your entire course. So instead of $89, you'll get it for $69. And now that September is over and we're into October and November and all these fall hunts, if you get it now, you're going to have an entire year to go through all this course. And believe me, you're going to need it. There's so much content in there. So check it out and use the promo code, The Western Huntsman, all one word. Last but not least is Tacticam. Guys, you know I've been using Tacticam for a very long time. I really like my Tacticam 5.0s. I like my Tacticam in the wide lens, so you can get that kind of wider angle and shot. They've upgraded now. They've got the Tacticam 6.0, which is super cool. I can't wait to get mine. And also the cell cams. Don't forget about the Tacticam Reveal cell cams. They've got a bunch of different series of these things, and I've got them all over my property, so I know what's going on at all times. Whether I got a bear that's coming after my chickens, or if I have an intruder down at the driveway, or if I have a giant monster whitetail buck over in my hunting spot, I know what is going on at all times. I love my Tacticam reveals, guys. Check it out at tacticam.com. Let's get back to the show. Here we go.
Oh, yeah. They would. And you see that, and then that breaks through, and if you reciprocate it, and you fall on your sword, and for me, my whole thing is being honest, and that's exactly what I tried to do in the book, is be honest, and I would just let people know, like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like, I need a little bit of help here. Everybody would drop what they're doing to do it and help me. And like I said, that learning curve was steep and painful, and there were real consequences to the dumbass actions I took. But that's exactly what I was looking for, and that's exactly what I found out there.
So as you got settled in there, and you're kind of meeting all the neighbors and settling into this new life in a cabin at 8,000 feet elevation in the Wild West here, so yep. To put it one way. What was like some big surprise that you really didn't expect? Maybe you had it in your mind that things were going to be one way, but the reality is once you hit it on the ground, it was way different. Do you have something like that?
Chopping wood, man. Holy shit. Just, I grew up in the Southeast where it was warm. Like, I didn't have a wood burning stove, and I didn't realize how many cords of wood you have to. I didn't even know what a cord of wood was.
Mm-hmm.
So, just off the cuff.
There's a lot of people that don't know what a cord of wood is. Just get on Facebook and try to buy wood and see what they call a cord of wood. You'll learn quick that a lot of people don't know what a cord of wood is.
Yep. Fair enough. But, just even that. And that was just one of those like shocking things like I did not take into account, thankfully, is, how much effort. like put the hunting and the trapping and everything else that I wanted to do aside. Like, how do you just stay warm? Like, that is like a surprisingly difficult thing when the average temperature is like 5 degrees for several months out of the year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, chopping wood is a whole man. I could do a whole podcast on firewood. It would bore the shit out of people, but it's a crazy thing. But a little hot tip, man. I've chopped many a log in my life, so I don't want anybody to give me a hard time about this. So I have earned my dues when it comes to chopping wood, splitting wood, stacking wood, all that kind of stuff. I finally broke down and bought a log splitter, and it's a game changer. They're like, I don't know, $1,200, but it's a game changer. It's mostly a time thing for me. I'm able to split so much more wood in a 2-hour time period than if I did it with an axe, and I love it.
Yeah, so I found that out this year. So this was our third or fourth winter up there. I had been so stubborn and hard-headed that I wanted to chop everything by hand. But little foreshadowing, I met a badass mountain woman who ended up being my wife, and we now have 2 kids together in this amazing time frame. So we have 2 little mountain babies, and this year all of my wood chopping in the summer fell right about the time my son was being born, which was August 15th of this year. So thankfully, one of our amazing neighbors had a log splitter. He looked at me and pretty much just called me a dumbass and said, use the fucking log splitter.
Nice.
And I relented, and it was amazing. Yeah. It went so much faster.
Game changer, right? I mean, I should have a log splitting company like sponsor this show. That's how big of a fan I am. I love my log splitter. I put my the little ear things in that connect to my phone, and I'll listen to a podcast or something while I'm splitting, and in like 2 hours later, all of a sudden I've got a couple of cords of wood split and ready to go. It's awesome. So
yep, and it's more uniform. That was what my wife was saying. Yeah. I guess I am a very terrible cutter by hand with consistency of sizes of logs. So we have 2 different stoves in our cabin. So the upstairs one is a little smaller. So, the sizes of the logs I'd split would be all over the place. But now with the log splitters, like, damn, these are uniform. These things going great. Upstairs, downstairs, perfect. So
God,
I agree
awesome.
with you.
Yeah, tell me about your cabin, man. I'm super curious about it.
Yeah, so it backs up to National Forest. So the way Atlanta's laid out is very interesting. There's, a huge downtown area, of like 4 blocks of probably like 20 houses. We call it downtown. And then on the back side of the town, which would be the south side, there's 2 big hills. And, in my mind, and I call it in the book, it's like we live up where the Grinch is, and downtown in the little city area is called Whoville. We're just on the backside, and we look down into the Yuba Breaks, what used to be Yuba City, looking down towards Rocky Bar, which used to be the state seat in Alturas County, a long, long time ago, back in the gold mining days, which is what Atlanta was founded on, gold mining. The interesting thing about Atlanta, and this is kind of a sidebar, is since I've been up there, I've been so engrossed in the history. You just get absorbed in this area, the presence and the power that's out there. But the town actually was one of the most, if not the most, lucrative gold mines in Idaho.
No kidding. I didn't know that.
Yep. And there's still some gold mining there today. We still have a lot of people who have claims and everything, but it was at one point had 2,000 residents in I think 1876, something like that. Of course, the majority were Chinese emigres, but it's actually been this whole thing. I actually wrote a fiction book called The Bone Scraper, The Atlanta Lode, which is going to be a series. It's kind of like Quentin Tarantino meets Louis L'Amour. It's a Western set in the 1860s, very violent, but really fun. But it covers all the history in Atlanta, Rocky Bar. And then in the second book, they all go down to the Owahis and learn about all the Hawaiians and everything. But I say all that to say there's just so much history there.
Yeah,
and there's actually an Atlanta Historical Society. And, I just got fully engrossed in that, in the downtime between hunts and trapping.
Yeah, I'm looking. I pulled it up on Google here, and it says Atlanta, living ghost town.
Yep.
And that's that sign coming in. Our home in the mount, or our home in the Sawtooths.
Yep,
So,
that's us.
Because I've never been. I've known where it was at, but I've actually never been to Atlanta itself. So,
Well, the standing offer, come out and we'll go run on my wolf trap lines.
all right, you got a deal. Oh, I found the Beaver Lodge. There we go.
Yep, that's it.
Pretty
Yeah,
sweet.
you need
Pretty sweet spot.
Need a place to stay
There you go.
and a burger.
So, and that kind of brings up a whole other topic, man. Tell me a little bit about how you got into trapping. You'd mentioned you'd met with Rusty Kramer, who's he's been on the show.
Yep.
And a great dude. I think he's still president of Idaho Trappers Association.
He sure is.
Yeah. Okay. Tell us a little bit about that. How you got started with that?
Well, it's interesting, and I'm sure the lifelong hunters, lifelong trappers, the feedback I've gotten has been very positive, but I'm sure some people roll their eyes because I approached everything from a very academic standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Coming in here to Atlanta, having only bow hunted for like 2 years and been pretty much a failure at it, except for the one deer I took. I wanted to beat down that learning curve. So I took after every opportunity I could, which is one of the beautiful things about Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of opportunity, and where Atlanta sits, we've got everything. We've got mountain goat. We've got, obviously black bear. We've got, antelope a little further downriver. We've got mule deer. We've got it all. And so, I started out with elk hunting. I was in a fortunate position to get a guide and went over in the White Clouds and did my first archery elk hunting, started to learn how to bugle and cow call and do all the things scientifically year over year. Went antelope hunting, mule deer hunting, black bear hunting. But what's interesting is for whatever reason, the real draw I had, and I think this came from my granddad who had a cabin in Georgia, and he was a hunter, even though I never went with him or did anything like that. He had traps around his cabin, and he always talked about mountain men and trapping. And, I'd always been a fan of history, and I knew about beaver being, the animal that really pushed the West expansion, right? The westward expansion, all for beaver. And so despite all the excitement around bow hunting, all these different animals, trapping was something that I was just sucked into. So I approached it very academically. Like I reached out to Rusty Kramer. Before I even set a trap, I was at the Idaho Trappers Association conference, going just all over the place, just anywhere I could learn from people, because I knew trapping would be a different thing than hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And I still feel that way today. It's like there is, in my mind, and people might argue with me, it's like there's hunting, and hunting is great. You have that primal feel of chasing down an animal with a stick and a bow, right? That's cool. But then you have trapping, which is just this fucking grueling experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way I can describe it, is it's grueling. And you have to become so intimate with the animal to understand and get them to step in, for a wolf, right? You have thousands and thousands of acres, and you need this wolf or a coyote or a fox or whatever to step in a 6-inch by 6-inch square metal plate, right? And that doesn't seem hard. And when people who've never trapped, they think, oh, you're such a cheater, you just go out and put traps and trap these poor animals. The ability to get them to do that and step on your trap is so hard. Mm-hmm. And when I started to do it and I found out how much smarter these animals were than me, oh my God, talk about like a drop kick to your ego. It was brutal.
Yeah. I always get a kick out of all of that, man. There's so much of it. The whole, especially from non-hunters, non-outdoorsman type kind of people, when they say things like, trapping is cruel and it's not sportsman, or baiting bears is not hunting because it's so easy. You just get all these bears coming in all over the place. You can't even keep up with them. And it's like, people say that stuff, and it's like, the fact that you said that tells me that you don't know shit about what you're talking about, because it's just not like that. And you're right. I think a lot of people, they kind of group trapping and hunting together as if it's like a super similar thing, and it's really not. It's a totally different lifestyle, and really, I feel like you have to really focus on one or the other to be really good at it in terms of, seasonally. Like somebody that is really big into elk hunting is not going to be out trapping every day in September or whenever wolf season opens. I can't remember. I think it's
it's about September. I think
it's sometime,
mid-September, so
mid-September
they
sometime.
over.
Yeah, they cross over. So, like, I have buddies that are prolific wolf hunters, or I'm sorry, wolf trappers. They do a great job every year getting these wolves trapped, but they don't start until after their hunts are ended because they understand they can't kind of do the two together just because of the nature of how different they are, and it takes you to a different country, and the work that goes into both of them are so vast. I love it. I love the concept of it. So tell me a little bit about trapping in terms of, did it attach to you as a passion? Is it something that drives you more so than hunting does, or which one is kind of like your primary focus now?
I would say trapping. It's so different, like you said. Like I believe that the trapping I've done and the focus I put on that has made me a better hunter. Mm-hmm. Again, just from that, like, attention to detail, understanding animal patterns. I mean, of course, a beaver or an otter doesn't have the same patterns of an elk, right? But there's some things you can put over, like patience, blah, blah, blah. But trapping has been where my focus has been at. And it's just because it is such a bottomless pit of knowledge. And every time you think you've got it figured out, an animal proves you wrong. And it's just, nobody has made me feel dumber than wolves, to be honest. So, like, when I hear people like Rusty Kramer, my buddies at Montana Trappers Association, Chris Morgan, there's just so many people who are out there doing it so well that blows my mind, because for me, I still haven't connected on a wolf trapping.
Yeah.
And I've come like fourth in inches, but it's just these situations where, for whatever reason, maybe I didn't descent my traps enough. Maybe I didn't have the right set, or maybe, the way I was having it go into bait wasn't the right way, because I'll get paw prints right up to the pad.
Yeah.
Or like, the trap pan.
But they won't step on it.
They won't step on it. They'll go right around. It'll be like a 90-degree turn, or something to that effect. And it's so frustrating, but it's also so engrossing, because every time you get like an inch closer.
Did you know? Go ahead. I cut you off, man.
No, that was it. They just get a little bit closer every time.
Well, eventually it's going to connect, and it's going to be one of those things where it's like playing a word search game. You're always looking for something to put this thing together, and then all of a sudden it makes sense, and there it is. And I think that's what happened. And I'm not speaking from a place of credibility when it comes to wolf trapping, because I don't trap wolves. I don't do that. And I simply because I would love to, but simply because it really does run through some of my favorite hunts when it starts, and you've really got to get those trap lines set before getting into December and January if you want to run them all winter. I think, or at least that's what I've been told. But did you know Rusty is perhaps the first dude in Idaho to trap a wolf since they've been reintroduced?
Yeah, I have heard that.
He told you that story?
He didn't tell me the story, but I have heard that of Rusty.
Yeah, I believe it. And so I think he was. I should get him back on the show. I haven't talked to him in a while.
Yeah, well, in the book, when I start to talk about trapping, one of the stories from Rusty, my head nod or hat tip to trappers, having done it for a few years now and seen a little bit of success, is, Tom Miranda, who I mentioned in the book too, obviously famous trap hunter. I have a book of his, Master Trappers. It's kind of a coffee table book, but he has a foreword, and I can't remember who the author is, but it's from the 1920s. And he said, there's two P's in trapping, and one is pleasure, one is profit. And clearly right now we don't have the profit, right? So the fur prices have just been, for lack of a better word, dog shit. For a few years. So people who are out there doing it are doing it pretty much at a net loss, either for conservation efforts and management, or, for their own furs, or to make a little bit of a buck here and there if they can, trap some wolves or maybe otter or something along those lines. And I talk about the book about there is nobody a harder worker than somebody who's trapping for a living, period.
Yeah.
And the anecdote I give is most people aren't doing it full time. And, Rusty is an example, and I have a picture in the book, and he sent me a video too, but, you get missed catches, right? You might be targeting wolf, you might be targeting coyote, you might head out to check your line at 4 a.m. before you punch into your regular day job at 9 a.m. And oh shit, you've got 2 full-grown mountain lions or black bears in your trap. And, the ethical thing you have to do is, put a catch pole around their neck, figure out how to release a very strong 4 coil spring trap from this really pissed off predator's foot, all before you punch into your 9 o'clock day job.
Yeah.
And it's insane. It's just one of those things, but you have to be prepared for that too. And that's, part of trapping is, you get, unintentional catches, but most of the time those are other really pissed off animals that want to rip your face off, and you have to deal with it.
Yeah. So what all have you caught trap-wise?
Trap-wise, so, the biggest thing that I've really fallen in love with are beaver. Honestly, we have so many up in the Atlanta area, and, ironically, as part of giving back to the town that I joined, in Atlanta, I ended up joining, or rather getting elected, its public office as a highway commissioner up there, because we have so many miles of dirt road. We have to keep clear of avalanches, everything else. Eventually, I was voted in as chairman, and we have problems with beaver washing out our road. And we're not obviously a big place. We have 2 operators. We have some heavy equipment. And, we can't afford to have these beaver washing out our road and causing millions of dollars of damage on a road that is our literal one way in, one way out. And that's become more impactful to me now as a father with 2 young kids. If life flight can't get in, we have to drive out.
Yeah.
And I've got a story about that life flight that's not in the book, where we almost lost my wife and my unborn son, which we'll touch on a little bit if you want to. But
yeah, I want to hear that.
Yeah. And anyway, so we had to do that. So I ended up working with Fish and Game. So I have a special kill permit for beaver that are encroaching and, doing damage on the road, which is a surprising number. So beaver, I caught my first otter last week. It was an accidental catch in a beaver trap, but it was really awesome. And I, hated fleshing that out because it is about as bad as beaver, but it's a beautiful, huge otter, black and gray. Other than that, fox, coyote, what else is there? Obviously, occasionally mink, marten, pretty big, and then wolf. Obviously, I've caught all those things that I just mentioned, with the exception of wolf, which is still kind of my what is it called, a white buffalo?
Yeah,
whatever you can't get.
Yeah, for a lot of us, man.
Yeah.
On the wolf topic, are you a member of Foundation for Wildlife Management?
Yeah, I'm prepared to get my check if I ever actually connect.
You got to catch one. Yeah, you got to catch one. Yeah, it's a great organization for that. So that helps. That you were talking about, what did he say? Profit was one of them, and pleasure was the other one. Yeah. So I'm curious because honestly, I read a lot of books, and you're a really good writer, man. You're good. It flows well. The book is like one of those. I always hate when I get a book and it just seems daunting to read it. Do you ever get those ones? It's like it's just too much information, or it takes too long to read. Maybe I'm just a simple dude. I don't like it when I'm reading a book and it takes forever to cover one page. You know what I mean? And so the way it's formatted is great. What made you sit down and say, you know what, I'm going to write a book about this because it's an interesting thing because the transition you went from is pretty extreme. What made you want to write a book about it?
I've always liked writing is the first thing. I've always been a writer. I've written another book. It was on artificial intelligence. Like I said, I just got done with writing 2 fiction books that I'm shopping around to publishers. Like, writing is kind of like my cathartic getaway. So I'd already been taking notes. Like, I've always journaled. So I kind of had these notes about, like, I knew when I was going through this divorce, when I was doing these things, that the things I was feeling, the things I was going through were not just me. There were other people who've gone through that stuff before. So I wanted to log, my unique experience. And then obviously I took a very unique path towards what I call like rehabilitation. But it was sitting down and talking to friends and then talking to new friends who were like, dude, like exactly what you mentioned earlier. Like, okay, so you were flirting around San Francisco and New York like a couple months ago, and all of a sudden now you've got, chains wrapped around your neck, crawling through rivers,
Mm-hmm.
making leather beaver tail and sending it back to me. Like what the fuck just happened to you, dude? Like, what hole did you get sucked in?
I love it.
And it was great to hear that, but then I started to think about like, the term is becoming more colloquial now, like adult onset hunter, right? You hear that more and more. I think the pandemic, people realizing that, oh no, I can go to the grocery store and they might not have meat on the shelves, or I might have to fight some obese chick for a roll of toilet paper.
Mm-hmm.
You never know. And that's made more people, I think, hunt curious. Couple that with some of the popular influencers in the space who talk about bow hunting. And, I realize I'm not necessarily a unique anomaly, but I think there's so many more people who are good people who would benefit from learning about hunting, learning about trapping, that don't quite have maybe the, some might call it gumption, others might call it stupidity to go full bore like I did. And there's just not a lot of resources out there for people to say, oh, I can do that too.
Sure.
And that's really what I wanted the book to be, is like to cover all of the folly that I went through, which is a lot. And if you've read some of the beginnings, like, just down to like, okay, I shot a deer for the first time.
Yeah.
Now what do I do?
I love that. I love the way you described that too. It's like, okay, we accomplished this, but now the work, actually starts, and it's like, what do I do with this thing? And YouTube and how to gut it, stuff like that. I love stories like that. I love when people make drastic changes in their life to follow something that they're passionate about, or something that they feel like they're missing in their life, and they make a major sacrifice or change to achieve the thing that fulfills them better. And that's what this story is, and that's why I kind of, we first connected, and I read briefly the description, and I was interested like immediately, because that is right up my alley in terms of, I've always been a hunter. I've always been an outdoorsman. I was raised that way. My whole family was, and so it's always super interesting to me when I see somebody who wasn't like that growing up, that made this drastic change as a lifestyle and has taken it on wholeheartedly. And now you're where you're living, compared to how you used to live and where you used to live, and what your maybe goals were 5 years ago or 10 years ago compared to what they are today. And the things that, because I just don't know that there's a lot of people out there that will ever fully understand how, the disparity between the two different lifestyles. Like getting frustrated because your Uber Eats didn't show up in time versus getting frustrated because you just sharpened your axe, but then you hit a rock and now you've got to stop and sharpen this thing. It's getting dark and you don't have enough wood. Does that make sense? It's just the life is so different. The perspective changes so drastically. And so
100%.
Yeah.
It is the consequences for actions. Like,
great.
If your freezer goes out in a city, okay, your food might go bad, but you can go Uber Eats or you can go to the grocery store and buy more. Our freezer goes out in Atlanta, Idaho, and it's snowing. We literally can't leave.
Yeah, you're stuck
for potentially days. And, what do you do then? Well, we have a backup freezer, right? Or we have a little pantry that we have enough preserved food that we've pickled or done whatever with. And it's that long-term planning. And, you seem to only learn how to long-term plan after something fails.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of what the book's about. Like, okay, well, I did this thing. Well, that fucked up. And now I had to pay for it in this way. Now I'm going to re-architect that area of my life a little bit differently so I can plan appropriately. And like you said, it just resets your brain in such a primal way that I can't ever go back. Right. I can't.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you lift up the curtain or you look under the rug and you see what life's really made of. And you're like, oh my God, like, you know, some people might think living out in the sticks is a life of duct tape and paper clips, which, you know, it is. Like there's this MacGyver aspect to it, of course. But what you really, it's really the inverse. You look at living in a city and you lift up the rug and you see all this infrastructure that is actually so fragile that you are so dependent on and so many people are dependent on. And, you know, I think the pandemic helped expose that, like the grid going down in Texas in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
You know, again, the supply chain issues we face with, like people are starting to see cracks in the foundation and driving to be hung curious, which again is, you know, ultimately why I wrote the book, to let people know, like, you know, it's okay. Like, I think everybody should have their elbows deep in a deer's gut cavity at one point in your life. And maybe 50% of the people who find themselves there might be like, well, this was an experience and I never want to do it again. Or the other 50% will be like, I feel amazing. You know,
I feel
it sucks.
alive.
Yeah, it stinks. This is horrible. It's not fun. It's gory. But now, if shit hits the fan, like I know what to do. I can pull a heart out of a deer and throw it in a pan, and you know how to handle the meat or turn the hide into clothes. You know, I'm always a little weary when I talk to people because I think people will, especially people I knew in the cities, are like, "Holy shit, man, you went full prepper!" Like, you know, do you have like a cavern with ammo and everything else?
A bunker.
Like, well, sort of, but you know, also no. I don't have like, you know, 800 days of dried foods. You know, it'd be cool to get there one day now, but
Sure.
You know, it's not full prepper mode, but it's about being prepared. So it's a fine line between, you know, what you might see on the History Channel with doomsday preppers or whatever, but there is this just element of self-resilience.
Yeah. And the reliance that you have on yourself. And I think that there's a changing tide of how people view because the term prepper got demonized. Is that the right word? It kind of got this nasty connotation of like these super fringe kind of unrealistic conspiracy theorist type people that are stocking up for like a zombie apocalypse or apocalypse. And I think that after, like you said, COVID kind of changed the perspective on that and kind of shined some light on that's not what prepping is. Prepping and being able to survive and having some self-reliance in how you live is just a smart thing to do because it, like you said, I don't think that people understand how fragile our system and our societal system is and how easily that could get derailed. And I worry a lot, Zach, like when I travel for work and I do go visit some of these big cities like the ones you were talking about periodically. And I feel like that there is this massive amount of people in today's world that are kind of just going through the motions in life to achieve things that other people have defined as being successful, and they never questioned it. And so they're kind of in like this zombie mode pursuing these things that don't really actually make them happy, and they end up living this unfulfilled life of emptiness. And
that's that was me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's how many people out there do you think are going through the motions like that? Like, what do you have like have you ever thought about like what percentage of the population, especially from men, because I think that this kind of thing is more of a mentality from the man's standpoint. If you grew up, you know, a few decades ago, there was this standard that men had to have or achieve. If this is making any sense, but have you ever thought about that? Like, how many people are going through life like that and just fucking it up, and they don't even know why?
A lot. And what's funny is, obviously the book has come out, and the trapping community has been a huge supporter of it, and it's started to kind of eke and weave into kind of the periphery of conservation groups, other people who are interested in hunting. But even within those groups, some of the feedback I've gotten has like literally just, I didn't have a lot of expectations on what feedback would be, because I've always just decided to put stuff out there. Like, I write it,
Mm-hmm.
I work with a publisher, like get it out there, like close my eyes and see what comes back. But the feedback I've gotten is like, so many people have just reached out and said, you've described the thing that I haven't been able to, which is,
Yeah.
I feel trapped, or I feel like I'm in this rat race. And it's even some people who are, pursuing outdoor lifestyles, like, trying to be conservation officers or something else. They're like, I'm trying to fill this void. And I think that maybe being a conservation officer might solve that problem, or, working as a biologist in the outdoors might solve that problem. But, talking about not getting to the core of just this rat race that so many of us get stuck in. And that's been one of the most uplifting things, to be able to put something out there that people can at least resonate with, and maybe help them, define their own emotions and, worries about our broader society.
Yeah.
And saying it's okay to unplug, it's okay to step back and, do things the old way and learn those things, even if you didn't grow up around it, right? Like, it's okay
Yeah.
to go and
Yeah.
fail and try. And as long as you're out there doing it, you can find mentors for sure. But yeah, that's been great to hear that feedback more than anything else.
I think you're gonna find that. How long's the book been out?
Just a couple of weeks. It came out
Okay.
on October 18th, so just at a month.
Sweet. So I think you're going to find that a lot of people are going to have that kind of feedback, that similar feedback, and the relatable. And it doesn't matter. But like what you were just talking about, Zach, like there is this void that they don't know how to fill. They don't know. They know there's a void, but they don't know why. And it's because so many of us have been. It's been ingrained into our mind that there's a certain way to live your life as an American. Right? There's a certain thing to pursue. There's a certain path that everybody needs to take. And that kind of thing, it bothers me, because it wasn't always like that. But when you look back historically, it was these things of self-reliance and being able to achieve and handle situations and react accordingly and be prepared and protect your family and all those things. These were all just normal. Whereas we've become the society where it's like somebody else is putting a dot on a road map and then putting you in a car in cruise control and saying, this is where you have to go. And then we get these people that are super depressed. We've got this society with the highest amount of people on like these different medications because they're depressed and they don't know why. There's no fulfillment. They feel lost. They feel like there is just no path to get out of this race. And I'm not saying that hunting and trapping and fishing and being an outdoorsman or living at 8,000 feet is a solution for everybody. But I do believe that society has created this in a sense where we're not allowed to define what we think is a successful life. Like for me, I getting up in the morning and driving through traffic to get to an airport to fly to another city to sit in a meeting, and then getting in some more traffic and fly home, see my kids for 2 minutes before they go to bed, and they get up in the morning and go do something similar the next day. I'm sorry, that's not how I'm going to be defined, and that's not my life. It's just not. I don't care how much somebody pays me. And so
you're giving
inspiring.
me PTSD with that. PTSD with that description, man. Like, it literally gives me chills, hearing you describe that, because that description you just said was me.
I know. Absolutely. And it was me too. And so it's just that's why I was so excited when I kind of read the premise of your book. And it really piqued my interest because of that. And the thought that there are so many people out there that need something like that in their life, and they don't even know it yet. And so we're doing our part here, Zach, to help people kind of get the blinders off.
Yeah, I sure hope so. Because like you said, it doesn't have to be hunting and trapping. It doesn't have to be you know, full bore diving in feet first.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know you haven't finished the book, but I'll give a little bit of a foreshadowing here. And if people could take away one thing after this call, it would be, and I'm actually going to stand up and grab a copy so I don't misquote this real quick. So bear with me.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
And I'm going to flip to the back of the book. You hear the pages turning. By the way, I do quote Jeremiah Johnson quite a bit in this book.
You won't be judged for that here.
Which is good. Where are we at here? I'm having a harder time. I guess you read the book 100,000 times in editing, and then you can't find what you need.
Yeah, man.
Which, by the way, it's probably worth noting. The publisher that I went with, I actually had an opportunity to go down to Austin, Texas, and it was pretty awesome. I actually got to work with Tucker Max. I'm not sure if you know who that is, but he's a 4-time New York Times bestselling author. He wrote the book series called I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, very interesting and unique, obviously, subject matter, but he's an amazing writer, and he's got a publishing group now. And what's funny is he actually has a blog called, I think Doomer Dads or something along that way, but he actually owns a ranch in Texas now. He's become more hunt curious and where his food comes from, raising bees, raising cattle, harvesting bison and things like that with his kids to, get them involved. But, he's the one who ripped this book to shreds. So if there's any inkling of good creative writing in here, just imagine me sitting there talking about my ideas with Tucker Max and him telling me how fucking stupid it is and that I should be changing it to something else. And we did. And we worked collaboratively, and he helped really mold a lot of what I was.
How long did it take you, Zach, to write the book?
So honestly, it took me 6 weeks.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, and I can't find that quote, so I'm not going to try while we're live. But it took me 6 weeks, but it was also with a lot of the coaching from Tucker. So I'll give a little bit for anybody who's out there really interested in writing. The best advice that I got from Tucker and the group down in Austin, Texas, Scribe Media, they're the same ones who helped publish David Goggins' book and a few other, really big New York Times bestsellers.
Yeah.
Was vomit drafting. I told you I've always written, but I always write and I think, oh shit, that's pretty good. And then I'll go back and I'll edit the same sentence 40 times.
Yep.
And never get anywhere. So he told me put blinders on and just write every day. Block out the words behind it and never go back and touch it till you get to editing. And I actually did it, and I just stuck with it. And so it's called vomit drafting. And I just vomited it out, every single thing that I had in my head, and got it on paper. And then all of a sudden I had 50,000 words, right?
Wow.
That's a 250-page book, whatever. And then you go through editing. And then obviously the editing is just horribly brutal because you look back and you're reading some of the stuff you wrote that you thought was great. And you're like, wow, am I a third grader? What happened here?
Yeah, I've done that a few times, man.
Yeah, it happens. But, then you start to be able to carve it out, and we had a caregiver for our daughter. She was, God bless her, she listened to me read the book out loud several weeks in a row and just sat there and was a warm body for me to read to. And we molded it. And I think I'm proud of the end product. I think it turned out pretty good. But
yeah.
The quote I couldn't find, it's actually a story. I have it somewhere in the back of the book. It was a story that was written in 1907. It's called The Machine Stops. Okay, I remember it now. The Machine Stops. It's a short story, and anybody here who should go Google it right now, pull it up. It's 27 pages. I think you can get it from UC Berkeley online. It's a PDF.
Mm-hmm.
This writer, can't remember his name, literally foretold air travel. This was before the Wright brothers.
What did you say the name of it was again?
The Machine Stops. a very apropos name. And the premise of this is it's a story of this woman and her son. And in this futuristic world, this gentleman from 1907 is describing is everybody has moved underground and everybody has their own cells, like their own rooms, because there is no need for air. There's no need for this because this machine is providing everything for you. They only seek higher education. So everybody stays in their room. And essentially you can FaceTime anybody anywhere in the world. And you're supposed to give lectures and only focus on philosophy and the real, higher callings of life.
Wow.
But what you find in this story is this woman has her son who was assigned a room all the way on the other side of the world. And the son kind of stops FaceTiming her, essentially. I'm using FaceTime, but they call it something else in the story. And they have air travel. So she finally gets so worried about him that she leaves her room, which is the first time she's left her room since she gave birth to her son, like 30 years before. And the ship leaves the underground lair, flies up, and she's looking at these mountains, which are the Himalayas. And she just talks about being so disgusted. Like, how could any human have ever wanted to live in that area, blah, blah, blah. Wow. She gets to her son, and the moral of the story is the son has found a way out. And her son is leaving to climb out these air ducts as this machine starts to break down, actually. And there have been like some people who have made it out and found out, like, what did we do? Like, there's so much better life out here with real air, with, the mountains, the living world. And it was just so enthralling to me that existed. And somebody was already thinking about that in 1907. And I think it summarizes our world so well that we've just been, like you mentioned earlier, just indoctrinated that let us provide for you. Let us put you in that car, set you on cruise control. Don't worry about anything. But people, and I think I'm one of them, have started to kind of see the flaws in that and are starting to break free, just like they did in that story. But it's amazing. You should go read it. It's 6 pages.
It's almost creepy, man. It's almost creepy that a guy wrote that in 1909. Let's see,
1907. Yeah, you'll have to look it up, but it's pre-1910.
That's crazy. It's half eerie that somebody had that kind of foresight, because it probably is like some kind of preemptive way to talk about what our society, and not that we live underground in cells or whatever, but there is just I don't know. I'm going to check that out. I'm going to read it because I'm interested in stuff like that. I think it's pretty cool.
It'll absolutely blow your mind.
Yeah.
There was actually somebody at my work who had mentioned it to me who was like an English major, and I read it offhand. I'm like, holy shit. Like, there is no way like this crazy person wasn't a time traveler. But yeah. You'll read it. It'll blow your mind. And it just goes to the storyline we're talking about tonight. Like, it's sad. And you're right. Like, the prevalence of pills, the depression. Like, I have close friends who have gone down these paths of, careers, whether it be lawyers, doctors, whomever. And, we talk, and sometimes it's sad. Like, there's real depression there. And it's from, people who have succeeded by those standards that have been set out. And then you think about the people who were left behind, right?
Yeah.
What are they feeling? And there's so many. It's just a generation.
Oh, yeah.
It's sad.
Yeah. It's bad. It's gotten it gets worse with every generation, and it just feels like there's no way to stop it and no way to refocus what it means to live your life in a way that you want, not what society expects of you. And that's what I like about what you did is you bucked the system when you had achieved these heights as working in what we all have been indoctrinated to view as a successful life. And you gave it all up, and you bucked the system and pursued what you were passionate about and what you felt as a calling to switch to. So anyway, congrats on that, and congrats on the book, man. I know I've kept you long here, but this is a really good conversation, dude.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and love the podcast, and had some great guests on in the past. So I feel very privileged to have been able to join you, and even more privileged that you picked up the book and you've read some and you've enjoyed it. And I just hope that it'll continue to impact people in a way that either A, gets them outdoors, or B, helps them find their own path to happiness, because that's exactly what my path brought me. It brought me a new wife. It brought me 2 wonderful kids who all love the outdoors and are willing to go do dumb stuff with me in the woods.
I love it. I love it, man. And you're raising a new generation of outdoorsmen and hunters and people dedicated to this kind of lifestyle. So it's absolutely fantastic. So you guys listening, Turning Feral, A Modern Journey of Hunting, Trapping, and Living Intentionally in the Wilderness by Zachary Craig Hanson. Zach, where can people find the book?
Really, wherever books are sold. So Amazon is probably the best place. Barnes and Noble carries it. Probably not at your local shop, but you can get it online. If you Google it, you'll find it. And any support will be much appreciated.
No, that's fantastic. I have guys. I'll put the link to the Amazon where I bought it off Amazon and it was here in like 2 days. It was awesome. I'll put the link in the show notes so you guys can check it out. And is there anywhere else you want to direct people to, like Instagram, Facebook, website, anything like that?
Well, given my history in artificial intelligence, I gave up most social media long ago. However, I am pretty active on LinkedIn, if you can call that a social media platform. So if you have a LinkedIn, add me there. Otherwise, you can reach out to me via email. You can reach me at zach@theoutfitter.guide. That's another company I'm starting in the outdoor space. We actually are going to have a booth at the Western Hunt Expo in Salt Lake City in February. So you can come visit me there as well.
Sweet.
Talk about, guiding and outfitting as well as the book. Yeah.
That'll be fantastic, man. Well, I sure appreciate you joining me on the episode here. Let's keep in touch. I want to kind of see how your journey goes as you go forward. I have a feeling you're going to have more books in the future as well. I'd love to get you back on in the future and just kind of let's stay in touch and keep doing it, man.
Well, perfect. Well, you have to visit Atlanta now. So come on out, stay at the Beaver Lodge, and we'll go run some wolf trap lines, and maybe you'll be my lucky charm.
You never know, man. You never know. Usually I'm pretty unlucky to take along, just being totally forthright with you.
Yeah, me too. But maybe 2 wrongs will make a right.
Well, I appreciate the invite. I'll definitely come down there. I'm super curious to see this little town. Again, man, thanks for coming on the show. This was awesome.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim.
You made it. That's the end of the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please make sure you're following us on Instagram @TheWesternHuntsman and write us a good review at Apple Podcasts. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Stay Western, and I'll see you on